So this is India Simmons interviewing Miss Naomi Samuel on May 14, 2019 in the Texana room. So Miss Naomi, why don't you start off by telling us when and where were you born?
So I was born in Dallas, Texas on April 10th, 1997.
And can you tell us a bit about your neighborhood?
Yeah, so I grew up in kind of not a small town, but a cozy town, Garland, Texas. And so my neighborhood was really diverse. It was very friendly, typical Southern hospitality type neighborhood where you might not know someone, but if you're walking by someone, you say hi. It'd be weird if you didn't. Just a very nice, diverse little pot.
And can you tell us a bit about your family?
Yeah, so my family, so I love my family very much. We're close. My parents immigrated from Addis Ababa, Ethiopia to Dallas, I want to say in the 80s and the late 80s. And my little sister, I have a little sister, her name is Lydia, and she is 4 years younger than me. So she's graduating high school this year, and I'm graduating college this year. And we're all very close. Not the most traditional Ethiopian family, but I would say both of our cultures, Ethiopian and American, are very important to us.
So growing up, what did a typical day at home look like for you?
It's loud. I grew up in a very, not a very, very small house, but a small enough house to where you're never gonna not hear the next person, the person in the next room. And there's always either my mom poking her head into the room me and my sister shared and just kind of what's up guys, just getting in our business kind of, or just my dad yelling about something, but in a grumpy dad kind of way. But yeah, I would say, what was the question?
How would you describe a normal day at home growing up?
Yes, I would say just kind of, you wake up on a Saturday morning, there's Ethiopian music playing in the background way too early because my mom's up cooking and cleaning that early. When my grandma came, definitely a lot of smells of onions to wake up to. And then maybe we'll all have breakfast together, either a traditional Ethiopian breakfast, and I'm complaining, but we're all eating, talking, kind of just arguing about anything we can. And you can just kind of hear the family, you can hear everything. It's very loud, very lively, I would say.
That's wonderful. Now you mentioned earlier your neighborhood, you considered it to be diverse. How would you describe fully race relations growing up there?
Yeah, so I would say I was hyper unaware of race growing up just because it was cookie cutter diverse to the point where I never was aware if someone else was from a different background than me. That never kind of went across my mind. I just figured, a person's a person. So I was aware of what other people were in terms of, this person has this culture and this, that. But race was a word that I had probably barely said up until I came to college.
I see. And how would you describe high school for you?
So high school is awesome because I went to Garland High School, and it wasn't perfect, but it was just like Garland in the sense that it was cookie cutter diverse. We would all joke about how all of our friend group basically belonged on a billboard somewhere because, when you looked at us, it was just, you had someone from each and every background pretty much. And so that was really nice and definitely something that I took for granted. But again, the idea of just a real community and just friendly people, everyone who kind of saw value in each other, but it wasn't this aware type of value. You weren't making an active effort to say, this person's from a different background, but we're going to get to know each other regardless. It was very much just natural for friend groups to be incredibly diverse, and no one, I would say, seemed to be aware of that.
I see. And what prompted you to choose SMU?
Honestly, I had very little experience with American colleges because my parents had went to school in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. So for me, visiting SMU for the first time, and it was my first college I visited, period, my sophomore year of high school, it was just incredibly impactful. It made a big impression on me because it was the first university I'd visited. And of course, visually, it was very stunning. I had zero expectations of what an American college looked like. So for me, while it also very much visually impacted me, I would say financially, that was the only barrier that I was worried about with SMU. I would say that really when it came to SMU, my concern was just being able to pay and not necessarily the acceptance or things like that. And so when I found out that I was accepted into the business school as a freshman, which doesn't typically happen, and that came with a scholarship that I needed, and the kind of scholarship started rolling in, I was like, okay, this is looking like a very attractive choice to me. And I knew that wherever I went to school, I needed to be able to financially support myself afterwards. And so for me, business, natural choice. And so staying in Dallas, business, SMU, it kind of all just went together.
I see. Now, at the time, did SMU have any sort of reputation amongst the Black community that you perceived?
So I would say, again, coming from that diverse community, a lot of us weren't super aware of race relations and things like that on college campuses. I think that that's something that sparked up even more during our time in college, not necessarily before we came in, but I do remember researching SMU and seeing kind of like jokes on sites saying, oh, it's like the Southern Millionaires University and it's like all white. And you know, me not being aware of race relations really at that point, being very happily oblivious, I just thought to myself, oh, I guess my friend group is just gonna be white. That's really how I pictured college going. Because I didn't think that, you know, like race/socioeconomic background would affect, you know, how people chose their friends. But I would say that I also did read on some threads, kind of concerns from people that basically that it wasn't as easy of a place to be for minority students. And I kind of just let it go over my head because I really, in my mind, I just had this very idealistic image of different educational institutions since I had such a positive experience at my own. So I would say I had seen the red flags, but just totally disregarded them. Totally disregarded.
I see.
Yeah.
What were some of the dreams you held as a child?
I mean, I think that the one dream that has stayed consistent for me throughout my life since childhood is probably just making my parents proud. And I don't mean to be like an immigrant first generation cliche, but for me, I know that all I really knew was that I just want to make my parents proud. And it's not something that they put on me necessarily, but I just always had so much respect for them in terms of not only like going across the ocean to be here, just specifically for me and my sister for education, but just their character is just like unlike anything I've ever seen. And so for me growing up, I very much idolized both my mom and my dad. And while my dreams have definitely changed career-wise, I would say that like really just, I'm a very much in my head person, and in my mind somewhere has always been, you know, this hope for my parents to just be as proud of me as I feel like they are now. And so that's been kind of a dream come true, honestly.
And I'd like to clarify, you mentioned your first generation here. Had your parents gone to university in Ethiopia?
Yeah, so my dad went to some university and my mom went to some university.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So you wouldn't consider yourself as first gen college?
No. Yeah, I'm first gen for American college.
Okay. Just
Yeah.
want to clarify. And furthermore, you kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, but overall, what were all your expectations coming into SMU?
You know, I didn't have too much to go off of, especially because my cousin, the only person in my family who had went to college here really, that I knew closely, was kind of very close to me in age, and I don't know, not necessarily going to like a big university at first, although he is at one now, so I didn't know what to think of in terms of like, I don't know, like, you know, the classic Texas universities. But I would say that I was hoping for, I would say a lot of fun. I mean, you see like the images of colleges out there, and so I figured like fun and also for independence, because I didn't have a lot of space growing up in that Ethiopian household that I loved, and not a lot of space to just be myself and make mistakes. I was such a good kid growing up. Like I used to be such a good kid, and I think I relatively still am, but I would say that I was looking forward to just really like living more freely, making mistakes, but also knowing that it was very important to me to make an impact wherever I went. And so I knew that coming in, I was very much getting ready to do a lot of hard work. And I think I worked very hard in high school, but I understood that at college, I felt like for myself at least, the stakes were higher.
And when you first arrived on campus, how welcoming was the school?
So I feel like when I first came to SMU, there was like this honeymoon phase where I still wasn't noticing certain red flags. So I had a very good time. I think that when everyone first came in as freshmen of all different backgrounds, everyone was still very much wanting to get to know every single person that they met, very nice to everyone, etc. And so for me, the first few months were great. I was getting to know so many people and things like that. But I would say freshman year, like kind of after the first like couple months or so, that started to wear off a little bit. And I think that I would say honestly, immaturity and just inexperience with people of diverse backgrounds kind of started to show its colors. And for me, I will never forget freshman year is when I first started experiencing this phenomenon of how people people would speak to me or how they would look at me. And it was a phenomenon where I felt like whenever people were talking to me for the first time, they were kind of talking through me as though I wasn't of any value because, and this was my assumption, because they were typically freshmen who all wanted to join Greek organizations. And so for me being Black, it was most likely that I was not going to be part of one of those organizations and thus did not have social capital. And so I started experiencing that where I kind of had to make an effort for people to want to talk to me or like be in a leadership position for people to want to be my friend, which I had never experienced before until that year. And I would say I experience less now, but I'm hyper aware of how people now are viewing me when they talk to me because of that.
I see.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand you served as a residential assistant.
Yes,
So
I have a story there.
So you lived on campus all 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
Roommates?
I had one the first year and then after that, no.
Overall, what's been your experience living on campus as an RA?
I mean, it's definitely an experience. You live a totally different lifestyle in a way from other students because you're working in your living situation, and in a way you're always on call, which is, you know, if a situation arises, then you're the one people tend to go to, you know? So I would say that it's very fulfilling, but it's definitely the hardest role I've ever, I guess, completed pretty much now. So it is taxing, but fulfilling, and you learn a lot about patience, for sure.
And I understand you're a member of Sigma Lambda Gamma, is that correct?
I am.
Would you like to tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, so SLG, Sigma Lambda Gamma, here on campus, we have the prestigious Pi chapter, and it's a multicultural sorority, and it was Latinx founded. But I think what's really cool is that at SMU, you definitely see people of all different types of backgrounds, whether that means, you know, ethnicity, like sexuality, gender identity. And so I think that's been really awesome for me. It's definitely like my safe haven on campus, like the safe space I didn't know that I needed coming in because it wasn't in my plans. But very proud to be a part of that organization.
Excellent. And were you involved in any other clubs?
Yeah, so I would say another big thing I was involved in was Student Senate. So I started that my freshman year, was a Cox Student Senator, and then I was African American Student Senator. Whew. And then I was Diversity Inclusion Chair this past year.
Do you want to tell us a bit more about that?
Oh yeah, so crazy times happened really when I was African American Student Senator. It was the year that Trump got elected, and I think that brought forth a lot of racial tensions on campus. And a really big thing that happened during that, which was just really taxing on me personally too, was I helped lead a demonstration on campus, a peaceful demonstration, and that was at the time when a lot of people were starting to like join in, I would say, solidarity with Colin Kaepernick and kneel at different like kind of sporting events. And so we led a group of about maybe like 50 people, and we kneeled at a football game. And it was interesting because it just so happened that I believe at that game they were honoring veterans who had passed away. And so that was something. And then also members of the band also kneeled with us. Like I would say 2 members who are my sorority sisters. And so a lot of things happened from that. I remember after we had actually kneeled, it was a very victorious moment. You know, me and my good friend had like actually went back to my room and we were celebrating together, like cracking up, like, man, we really did that. And I was really proud because I had coordinated a lot with SMU PD to make sure they were very aware of what we were doing, and I made a good friend there. And so it was very much like they were aware and we had good relations with them. But because that happened at a game when, you know, veterans were being honored, of course, it's very easy for that to be misconstrued. And, you know, a big thing for us was, you know, understanding that, like, okay, so those people died protecting the rights that we are demonstrating peacefully here today. But, you know, we got a lot of flack in terms of media, also a lot of national media coverage because the members of the band had kneeled, and that had never happened before. I know that those 2 members, you know, my sorority sisters, had experienced different things. Like, for example, I believe their director, who had initially approved of them kneeling, later went back on it and kind of like made them feel like they were in jeopardy of their membership. And then also they had been called the N-word by certain teammates. And so those are things that, you know, are almost to be expected. It's sad, but it doesn't make it any better. And what they did was, it looked really hard because a lot of us were, you know, kneeling together, holding hands, maybe like 40, 50 of us. But with them, you know, it was just 2 of them on the field playing their instruments. And so really, like, I would say it was a very interesting time to be Black on campus. And, you know, of course, everyone kind of seeing you is thinking one thing whenever you're Black and things like this happen. And, you know, they assume like you're this radical and like you're not open to conversation. And it just makes me sad because it's like, you know, that initially started to demonstrate how there were certain injustices happening in this country just for the way people look, just that. And that is enough to rile people up so much, people who would never themselves, I would say, go to those lengths to demonstrate their rights and their liberties, the same ones that we have. But it's crazy how people get mad at the words Black Lives Matter. Like, it really boggles my mind. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. And now, as it pertains to clubs and organizations, were there ever any at any point that you felt you weren't supposed to join or couldn't join?
I would say at first, joining Student Senate as a Cox Student Senator, I feel like at that time, Student Senate was very much like a white boy club. And for me, you know, kind of having been charged with like this anger and like understanding like, oh, like I'm different, people are viewing me as different, it made it a lot harder for me to not necessarily fit in, but to be open to like seeing other people as, you know, potential friends and peers in the organization. But on the other side of the coin, you know, me being like one of the only Black members at the time, I want to say there were, you know, there was one other one who was African American student senator, and then maybe one person on top of that. So I felt very outnumbered, and like people didn't really make an effort to talk to me in a way, and so I respond to that by being very, I would say, like louder in Senate in terms of expressing my voice, and sometimes in ways that I felt like I was supposed to as the Black woman in the room and not necessarily how I wanted to. But I remember that was the first place really where like in an organization my confidence was just kind of shaken in terms of, you know, no one's gonna try to be your friend necessarily, no one's gonna be overly friendly because of the way you look most likely and because they're just not comfortable with that. And I don't think that's necessarily what was running through everyone's mind, but I would say being white in that chamber would have felt a lot easier than being Black, for sure.
And how would you describe your social life during your time here?
I don't know. I've had good times. I would say it was pretty poppin' freshman year, most popping of all times, but mainly because freshman year everyone's friends with everyone and you kind of consolidate and find the people that you really, really love. But I would say I've had a good social life. Again, I have noticed that it could be better in some aspects if I had social capital in like certain Greek organizations that tend to have just more members, more institutional power just because of like numbers, and naturally like those organizations tend to be white. But I would say like now in the place that I am, I feel very comfortable socially, and it's partly because I'm typically surrounded by people who are like either seniors or mature. And so those kinds of people tend to make me like less aware of my race and like more so just like hanging out or doing whatever because we have mutual interests and not because of like, I would say just like generic college socializing, because I feel like, I don't know if I'm too old for that or what, but over time I feel like people tend to, you know, just get with people who are more like-minded, and that's just what naturally happens, or maybe who aren't, but just have like similar experiences in another regard that like brings you together.
And how would you describe the culture on campus?
This culture, I don't know, I really like this culture is an enigma to me because the dominant culture is very clearly white and wealthy, and that's just that, no one can deny that. But I would say in terms of just culture, it's an unfriendly campus, I would say. Like, there are nice people, and I have met so many amazing people, and I've had a good experience overall, but it's something that like not even I see, like it's something people outside of SMU see. Like, for example, I remember my best friend who's, you know, blonde and blue-eyed pretty much, like she came to visit me at SMU one time, and she mentioned to me how on her way to my dorm, she had like on the sidewalk seen a group of girls, and she said hi, and they looked at her, didn't say hi back. Then she goes to the dorm, she goes to the elevator, and she tries to say hi to people, and they don't say hi back either. And so for me, I'm thinking, okay, I'm not surprised. This is SMU, like we're not gonna be nice people that we don't necessarily know. But for her to experience that as a white woman, I think that as a culture, like our open-mindedness isn't bad in terms of just like people who are different from us, but it's just like people we don't know. Like it's like there's this, not narcissism, but there's a lack of interest in like new experiences or like just anything that makes you step outside of your comfort zone even a little bit. Besides maybe in regards to like alcohol and drugs. So yeah, it's hard sometimes.
Could you walk me through a typical day as a student here?
So I'm not a typical student. JK, but I would say like students tend to be like fairly involved here, and so for me it's probably start off, maybe have, you know, a meeting in the morning, like let's say it's 11, Okay, I'll walk you through one of my Mondays, because Mondays tend to be my crazier days, and Tuesdays. But Mondays at 11 a.m., I'll go to therapy for about an hour, and then I'll go get some food really quick, and then I'll go to my staff meeting for being a residential assistant, and we'll talk there for a little bit, and then I'll have a little break before class, we'll get some work done. Email maintenance is so important. But after that, I'll go to a couple of classes. One of them might be like a regular marketing class. Another one might be like the marketing practicum class I just completed, which was an awesome experience. And then after that, I'll have a meeting with a marketing practicum project group where we talk about our project, our client work, etc. And then maybe if I'm lucky, I get a chance to eat dinner real quick. And then I go to exec for my sorority, and then I'll go to chapter for my sorority. And then I'll probably meet up with my friends at Fondren Library and just crank out some work.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so what would you describe your most memorable experience as a student here?
Well, something that was really cool, what if it wasn't me as a student? What if it was me like representing the students at an outside event for SMU-ish?
Valid.
Okay, so it was really unfortunate. So the summer of 2016, I'm sure you remember, there was that shooting of police officers in downtown Dallas by that one, I would say, radical protester. And so that happened, and downtown was shut down for a little bit, and I was interning at AT&T at the time, so I didn't go to work for a day. But in response to that, I remember President Obama and other people organized an interfaith memorial ceremony for the fallen officers. And President Archibald Turner actually reached out to me and some other students to represent SMU students at that ceremony, or at the memorial, really. And so it was cool because I got to sit on stage, at the same stage Barack Obama gave a really touching speech on, along with some other students, and it was really special because I remember my seat was in direct line of the camera, and there was this officer who wanted to sit towards the front, and they were like, will anyone change spots? Will anyone change spots? And no one in my group was changing spots, so I gave him my seat, and it was a really nice moment, and the words were just awesome, and I got to see the president in person, so it was really cool.
Very nice experience.
Mm-hmm.
And so you ended up majoring in marketing and English, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us a bit more about how race relations manifested themselves in those departments?
That's very interesting because they do so very differently. Okay. So in the marketing department, I would say it becomes more evident in the sense that Cox classes tend to be people who are more the Cox student stereotype, which does reflect that dominant SMU culture of being white, wealthy, and I would say in all those classes, the marketing one specifically, I was the only Black student. So I would say the material doesn't necessarily bring up race too much, but the environment definitely does, and you can feel it. But I would say what's interesting is in the English department, you'll see students who are, I would say more open in terms of experiences, just naturally with what they study. They're more aware of just global issues and more comfortable discussing those, and they can easily become more evident in the material because we read a lot of stuff about race, which is really cool, and very much there's no hiding from it. Everyone has got to know how to attack it. But it was interesting because I remember one time we were reading The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, and basically what happened? So I was in this class, and I wasn't the only person of color. It was me and another, I want to say, South Asian guy, which was nice. But basically, we're discussing the book, and you have Tom, and then you have Jim. And Tom is this young white boy, and he's a runaway, along with Jim, who was a slave, and he's a runaway slave. And so there's this girl in the class, and she's really nice. She lived in my dorm, but we're discussing the two boys and the man's plight, basically. And she says that they're experiencing the same thing because they both are doing something illegal. And so that was interesting for me to hear because I'm instantly thinking, okay, so she just compared the two. And so I see my professor kind of raise her finger to address it, and I'm like, oh, I can answer that. And so she's basically asking, what's the difference between the two? And so I say, well, the difference is that Jim wasn't considered a human being, he was considered property, whereas Tom was considered a human being at the time. So they have two very different plights. And my professor kind of just followed up with that, and she kind of backed me up on it in a way, and I came up to her after class and told her that was really cool, thank you for doing that, and being aware of, what just happened there. That was really messed up, because while I'm happy to explain things in that moment, it's also, you kind of look back on it and you're like, well, why do I, as the person of color, have to be, why should I even have to, explain that? Isn't it so clear? And a big thing, you have to learn almost as a student of color is that patience. But it's totally right to feel angry at times because really, it's why should you have to explain what the difference is between the two, and how could you be so historically unaware? But I think the person understood the difference, but I just remember that moment thinking, okay, yeah, this is still SMU. I still go here, yeah, like sometimes it fades in and out, my awareness of like the lack of awareness sometimes, but that was a very stark reminder. Yeah.
Did you have any mentors during your time here?
Yeah, I would say there's been a few people who have kind of, paved the path. Yeah.
You want to tell us a bit about that?
So I would say there's a lot of people who have been mini mentors for me in a way. I would say that a couple years ago, though, a person who graduated, Biko McMillan, was definitely someone I idealized a lot because, I didn't idealize him because he was as awesome as I thought he was, but I really admired his leadership style because we were involved in similar things. He had helped lead and play a vital role in that demonstration as well. He was very supportive in terms of the Black Lives Matter, kneeling demonstration. But also because something really distinct to me about his leadership style was how he always gave everyone a chance to express their voice. I think that there's a lot of different responses to racism / just being problematic in general, but Biko was very against, I would say, just canceling people completely. He really taught me to truly understand the issues from another person's perspective before just immediately shutting everyone else down. And he taught me the value of really inquiring why do people believe what they believe, because there are certain beliefs that are just not right? It's not ethical no matter how you spin it. It's not about justifying anyone's views, but he definitely taught me not to write people off. Especially in an instance where after the election, I saw that on Sigma Chi, this fraternity house on campus, they had put this big flag up that said, "Make America Great Again," on the front of their house. And I remember walking from my dorm, walking past that, seeing it, and then seeing a group of minority students touring campus, walking past that too. And I was so angry, I was unbelievably angry, thinking, well, SMU, this is why you can't have minority students on campus. This is why you're saying you have all these issues of recruiting us because we walk in and see things like this. What does that say to those kids who know that campaign wasn't necessarily for them? And so for me seeing that, I immediately go, Twitter fingers, I'm on Facebook and I'm saying, so this is really what SMU has to offer these kids, seeing walking by this flag, this is what they're gonna see. And I remember putting, take this flag down. And so me and Biko, I think there was another woman who had started a petition basically to take that flag down and I was circulating it, this and that. And then I remember Biko kind of approached me at one point and he said, well, in the same way that we can't, that we wouldn't have wanted them to take down certain things of our own expression. I honestly don't remember exactly what had happened, but something had happened where we had said something or done something, or maybe in the sense that we had exercised our right by kneeling in public spaces. He said that in that same way that we had the right to do that, they have the right to have their flag up on their house because it is their property and it's their views at the end of the day. And so I remember, posting on Facebook that I had changed my mind about this in terms of I still don't agree, but I don't think I have, the right to ask these people to take that flag down, to take down something that expressed their beliefs. And so that was hard for me, and that was kind of the loosening of a grip, of a tight fist. But I think that was a very growing moment for me, and it has been vital for me in terms of my roles as, for example, a diversity inclusion chair in Student Senate, where even there's still certain people who I can tell are not as comfortable talking about race and don't see why it still needs to be talked about and don't see that people's experiences like my own are valid. But it is so integral to just even take those people at face value because I'm not saying it's our job to do the work for them, but when we write them off, we do exactly what they've already done to us, and we're no better in some ways.
Overall, how well would you say that the Black community has been represented at SMU during your time here?
Represented how? In the bigger powers, or
how do you perceive it as?
In terms of representation, I would say on our marketing materials, very much yes. I can curse on this, yeah. So you'll see a lot of us in the marketing materials, and I kind of get it as a marketing major. You want to put out what you want to attract, but at the same time, I would say in roles of serious power, I don't think the Black community is very represented. I would say with Dr. Majay being appointed as our Vice President of Student Affairs this past year, yeah, that's a big step. He's even part of a historically Black fraternity, which is something I didn't expect to see in my time at SMU. So yeah, that's pretty great. But also, I don't know, I would say I feel that we are being heard by certain administrative powers, but in terms of the general campus, the Black community takes up space and we're loud, but we can only be that much so. And I don't know that we are truly represented, but I would say to a degree I do appreciate that SMU very much. It seems like administration does target those students to spotlight their work at times. And those times, yeah, I'm grateful for, and at those times I do feel represented.
And how, if you were to overall say though, as it pertains to student population, how do you feel we're represented there?
Yeah, so I really don't feel represented in the student population, and it's tricky because for me, like I sometimes feel like I'm coming from a position of not feeling like Black enough for the Black community, not feeling white enough for the white community, and feeling very comfortable in the multicultural community, which is why I think my sorority was a good fit for me. But I would say not too represented, and in a way I always am conflicted because, you know, I'm part of like the Black at SMU board, now the CIQ at SMU board, you know, they want us to help recruit students of color, and I always have problems with myself or like struggle with the idea of, am I asking someone to come somewhere where they're not gonna feel as good as they should feel maybe and have as good of a college experience as they might have somewhere that is diverse. But yeah, I would say that I do wanna see myself more represented on this campus, and I do wanna see more people of color here. But at the end of the day, I think that if the dominant culture isn't willing to just get to know the other side as if they're sides, but the other side of, I guess, the racial socioeconomic spectrum better, it's hard to ask people to come to this campus who don't look like that dominant culture. But in a way, I guess some of us always have to. It's just how it goes.
And what would you say to those students, to those younger students in high school who are considering coming here, knowing fully well that the dominant culture does not represent them at all?
I mean, that's why I never really enthusiastically tell people to come to SMU, but for those students, I always say, like, it depends on what kind of person you are. If you're willing to make yourself a voice on this campus, if you're willing to get past certain discomforts, if you already feel comfortable in a space where people don't necessarily look like you, then that's great. And if you plan on going to business, definitely go here, because you're gonna get comfortable in those spaces that you're gonna be in for the rest of your life. That will hopefully look better in 30 years or so, but aren't gonna look that much better in the near future. That's great. But if someone is, I would say, like, introverted to the point where, or no, scrap that, I'm not even gonna say introverted, because people can be introverted and still be really social. But I would say if someone is not comfortable with getting involved in the things that they like doing, that will force them to, like, you know, meet people and things like that, then they will have a hard time here, because as a Black student, no one's gonna like seek you out in terms of the dominant culture. But if you work hard, in terms of what you like doing, not necessarily what you feel like other people want you to do, then yeah, you'll have a great time. And I really do think that I did, but I would say if I didn't make the effort, absolutely not. Like with SMU, it's literally a relationship as a student of color. And like it can be an abusive one where it's really hard all the time, or it can be a healthy one where you put in work and then you definitely will like see it come back to you. But it is definitely not for everyone. I didn't ask my little sister to go here for that same reason. She didn't even apply. So yeah, it's not for everyone, but to the people who come here, really, I hope that they find mentors, because for me, like when I didn't have mentors, that was really hard, and I always really resented that, because I was like, who's supposed to show me like how this goes? Like, I very much felt like my friends and I had to like kind of figure it out on our own, besides a few people who did help us, so.
And overall, as a Black woman, how well did you feel that you were treated by other students and or faculty members?
It's tricky because besides like a couple encounters with faculty members that indicated to me that they didn't understand what it's like to be a Black student, I would say faculty members have been pretty fabulous about understanding my experience, making me feel comfortable, letting me be who I am in the classroom, like making me feel comfortable to be that. To the point where now I don't like seek out someone's validation to feel comfortable to be myself, like I just am in my identity. But in terms of classmates, I would say definitely at the beginning, like I would have wanted to see more from people like who obviously just didn't understand what it's like to be a student of color in a space like we were. Like I didn't understand, so I couldn't necessarily expect them to, but I just wanted to be treated like everybody else in a weird way. Like that's all I wanted in the beginning. But I mean, at the point that I am now, I think that my classmates, like, since I've become comfortable being myself, they're more comfortable around me. And I feel like I deal with less and less people every day as I've gone up in my college career who don't know how to act around people like me, because I think by the time you've made your 4 years here, you've definitely had to have, like, interacted with more people who aren't like you. Otherwise, you're probably not in the spaces I'm in, because I think I made it to some cool spaces and some cool classes, so.
I see. What do you believe gave you the most support / resources to obtain your degree?
I mean, in a weird way, I would say my family, because while my parents like weren't hyper aware of how American college worked, I mean, my mom was just obsessed with just researching with me and like helping me like throughout college. Like I'll just get requests from my SMU account all day, and it's from Plano where she works. And she has just been so on top of it in terms of like the financial aspect, because I like had no idea how that worked, and you know what they have been able to do financially, they have, and like for us it's been big, but it has really made the difference for me to be able to graduate with less loans than I should have had. But just in terms of like, I think that there is a lot that I've done on my own in terms of figuring out how to college. Like I feel like there wasn't necessarily anyone there who was like, oh, this is how you do this, this is how you do this, this is how you do that. But my mom just always pushed me, like in terms of just pushing me to be really on top of things. Like it was never like get A's, Naomi, like, you know, be really involved. It was just like, hey, like make sure you're being, you know, doing your due diligence. Like I don't want to see you be stressed about X, Y, Z later. So check on this, check on that. Let me check on something for you. What can I do? And so I feel like that was a constant like awareness of like, okay, like this is not a game. Like I'm here for a mission, like for a purpose. And so really like my family in general, like just keeping me motivated, and like at times where I just literally had to go to Garland, like go home for a breather from the environment, just to like get out of the SMU bubble, which I think anyone of any background can say they needed to do. Yeah, like my family has absolutely been the first and foremost reason why I'll be graduating on Saturday. Graduating on Saturday, if you didn't know.
Now, what do you believe may have limited your success as a student, if anything at all?
You know, it's hard. I'm sad to say this, but like I would say to a degree being a student of color, because like I love my identity and I wouldn't change it, but I would say if I wasn't African American, there wouldn't have been a lot of times in my first 2 years where I had shied away from things or thought that I wasn't capable of doing something, because literally no one who looked like me had ever done it. And so I think that while my biggest successes and the things that I love doing have been tied to my identity, it's been hard because I would say I can just think of more than a few instances where I thought to myself, like I just wouldn't feel comfortable there, or like I wouldn't fit in this space, and so I didn't do something. So I would say the perceptions and biases really that I've dealt with like had really, really hindered my self-confidence for a while, and I would say it took me until senior year to get that back.
I see. Mm-hmm. Is there anything at all that you believe could have helped you more in your journey at the school?
I mean, in terms of things that could be done, like the biggest thing that would have helped was just the dominant student culture being more receptive to people who looked like me. But I would say the biggest thing would have been like having a very clear minority student mentor who was involved in similar things as me and was also like distinctly like very much like there for me. And it's hard because I'm like, how can I say that? Because I did have certain people who were like, there for me, but I would say it's always like lonely sometimes because every student of color has like a very unique experience in terms of whatever they experience that is negative. But it's hard. It's really hard. I would say maybe more money, like not having to go to financial aid here and there, like whenever I should be doing something else or something. But you know, the thing is though, like it's hard because I wouldn't necessarily change anything. Like I think everything had to happen the way that it did for me to be the same person I am today. So while there are certain things I had resented for a little bit, I think that every challenge that I faced has been there for a reason. So for me, I'm good. But for future students of color, if they don't have a student of color mentor, I mean, I think that they could do it, but I think that it would help a lot.
Okay, and so to go off with that a little bit, is there anything at all that you believe students, faculty, administration, etc. could do better, or should continue doing?
I would say, and this goes off of something that I worked on this past year, but I would say they need to they need to start talking to people who don't look like them, like making an awkward but active effort when they see someone that they wouldn't usually talk to, that they would usually just put an invisible wall up before they would talk to. They need to talk to that person, because even for me, it's hard for me sometimes to like approach a white person and assume like, oh, look, we might have a connection here, like there might be something here, just in terms of like someone I don't even know, like, and not for a friendship, not for a relationship, just for like a passerby conversation. But students all over this campus and faculty need to start thinking, oh, like I'm not going to dismiss a person before we even like have a chance because of the way that they look and because of the assumptions that comes with that. So I'd say the biggest thing is just people need to stop making assumptions about other people, and that could honestly go for anyone on this campus. I think our campus is pretty bad about it, but Yeah, and then also for faculty and students, I think they're going to start implementing the CIQ training. So I hope that with that, and like also the human rights pilot course for diversity, I hope that faculty or students take those different things seriously and see how much they can learn from the other people in the room with them whenever those types of things happen. Because everyone has a valuable perspective, however different it is, and I think that sometimes people dismiss diversity training, but we're doing something non-traditional here, and students worked on it, and I think that it has a lot of value, but it depends on the learner, however seriously they want to take it.
I see. And overall, as you reflect back on your time at SMU, how do you feel about it?
Oh my gosh. I can't believe it's gone, but I feel like I conquered everything I wanted to do and I tied all the loose ends that I wanted to tie up. I wish I could kind of just talk to the Naomis of like freshman, sophomore, and junior year and tell them, it's gonna be okay, you're doing great, you've done so much. But I think that I'm just really happy looking back because everything that has challenged me, I know that it's something that I'm going to deal with in the future. And when it happens, like I always feel like, strength isn't like this imaginary thing in your mind. Like it's not an ego. Strength is just the ability to navigate struggle and pain. And so whenever things like that happen in the future, I'll know what to do because I've been there before. So looking back, I feel like I got exactly what I should have out of this education for the kind of future that I want.
And what are your plans for after graduation?
So after graduation, I'm going to take a long summer and I'm going to go to Ethiopia with my family in July. We're going to have a family reunion. Our Canadian family's coming. It's going to be great. And then I'm going to start work at Sendero Consulting in downtown Dallas on August 14th.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
Overall, do you have any regrets at all?
I mean, I say that I didn't, but I don't know. Honestly, nothing big. Nothing I can think of. Maybe, nothing. No
So
regrets.
if you could go back and do anything differently, would you?
I mean, I would say I've definitely made mistakes, but again, they've taught me things. Like, I've missed a couple meetings, skipped a couple classes, but I made it out all right. So, maybe I needed that sleep here and there.
Do you wish any of your circumstances had been different?
I mean, this is random, but I always remember growing up, my friends, I think they were all just kind of from a little bit of a better socioeconomic background. I remember my biggest thing growing up was I wanted a 2-story house. And so even in college, it was a struggle because I didn't have room in our house because my grandma moved in with us. So I literally I had places to be, but I just never had my own space. And it was really frustrating. And so I found myself staying at SMU longer than I needed to. But in terms of circumstance, I think it would have been cool to have my own room at home. But then again, I wouldn't have spent so much time here and I wouldn't have been so close to my family as to feel so comfortable with them sharing the things that had really strained me and made me stressed out during college. So it would have been nice to have a getaway from SMU. Sure, that would have been a great circumstance change.
And if you could go back and tell your younger self one thing, what would you tell her?
Just do it. Just do the thing that you're afraid to do. It's not that big of a deal.
Well, Ms. Naomi, is there anything at all that you feel I may have missed which you would like to further discuss?
Well, I would say if anyone's watching this and they don't necessarily understand what I say, I just really invite that person to talk to people who don't look like you, whether it's a stranger in a coffee shop or someone you've always known. Just ask people about their experiences, and that's something I'm going to work on too because we all have biases. I'm always trying to be better myself, but everyone has a valuable story, everyone has something you can learn from, and life is just too short. The meaning of life is learning about other people's lives too, so I would encourage that person to do that.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your story with us today, Ms. Naomi.
Thank you, India.